right, well, we'll go ahead and get started this morning with our annual building permit and population stats briefing. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to open it up and then I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Smith, who's our Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services. We do this every year. It's kind of a pulse check on where we are as a city. Are we growing? Are we shrinking? What are building permit numbers looking like? What are housing numbers looking like? Really just kind of looking at the heartbeat of the city. And when we look at building permit numbers, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, those really signify the health of a community. If a community is being invested in, meaning people are spending money and they're building and they're investing in those sorts of projects, that means your community continues to be strong and vital and thriving. So 2024, by a way of recap, it was another very strong year of growth in the city of Sioux Falls. There's still an incredible amount of investment that's happening in our city and our community right now. Not quite as many large projects as we're going to talk about in a minute here. You'll see the list of the large projects. Not some of those huge big ticket items like we've seen in the past, but still another strong year despite some of the uncertain economic times that we've been in this past year and will likely be in into 25 as well. The third quarter of this year was actually our strongest time as people and developers, they really kind of waited the first half of the year to see how the market would normalize after there's that spike of interest rates in 2023. So now that interest rates have kind of normalized at that level and have sat at the same place for a while, we're seeing some reinvestment again. So I want to talk a little bit about the number of permits that we issued this year. We look at total number of permits just as another indicator of how much work is being done in the city of Sioux Falls. So just for clarification, you pull a $10 million building permit or you pull a permit on your deck that you're going to expand for $10,000, both of those are a permit. So we had a few less permits this year than we've seen in previous years. 2022, a little bit of an anomaly there, as with 2015 when we had some hail damage and some storm damage, some derechos in 2022. So a lot of shingles and roof work that year. So if you're wondering what that spike is, that's what that's about. But about 6,200 total permits issued this year. One thing that we're seeing, though, with a little bit of dip in permits is, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, is the cost of building right now. And I want to just give you an example of some numbers that we track. In 2020, so if you look back in 2020, we had about 7,300 permits. The cost to build a 1,700 square foot home in 2020 was roughly $287,000. And that same home today costs about $349,000 to build, just 5 years later. That's about 22% increase. And so inflation's really stabilized for materials, but mortgage and interest rates are quite a bit higher than obviously they were in 2020. So back then we were anywhere from 2 to 3%. Now we're anywhere from 6 to 7%, which is honestly making home ownership harder to obtain. And we know that. And so we continue to do things to make sure we're doing all we can to keep those costs as low as possible. But those mortgage rates and some of those material costs, they really have a ripple effect across the entire housing market. So a lot of headwinds, and when we talk about these, we often talk about a homeowner or the development community or the building community, the city government. We face these same inflationary pressures. And you've maybe heard me use our fire station example, but the station we built in 2020 and the next fire station we have to build was like $3.2 million in 2020. It's over $6 million now. Same blueprint, same architect, same everything. So we're dealing with that as well. On the next slide, though, I want to then look at construction values. So where do we go then with construction valuation? We obviously had a boon year in 2022. That's the big hockey stick that you see there. But our fourth year in a row of being over $1 billion. And I really believe that this is kind of going to be our new standard, our new benchmark, being above $1 billion. We see a great mix right now of residential and commercial. We're also seeing remodeling that's holding very steady. Some people are maybe, instead of saying, hey, I want to move up or I want to get into a different home, saying, well, with interest rates, we're already locked in at this low rate. Maybe we just remodel our current home. So we're seeing steady remodel rates, but our single-family residential is up. Kevin's going to talk about that. Townhouse, multifamily, that's really steady. There's some absorption happening right now on that. And on the commercial side, we really had a lack of large projects like we've had in the past. We still hit $1 billion, but we didn't have those 30, 40, $70 million permits like we did in the past. We had a couple of them, but not quite as many. So that kind of leads us to the population growth and what happened to our city in terms of growth. And as you can see on the sign here, we are just nipping at 220,000 people right now. We went from 200 and I think it was right around 13,000 last year. So a growth of almost 5,700 people in 2024. That's roughly 2.66% growth year over year in terms of the number of people. It's pretty typical for what we've been experiencing as our new norm. But it's when I took office, I remember 7 years ago, I think we were about at 180 something at that point. And so continue to see some pretty substantial growth. I'm also watching for other cities to release their population numbers and U.S. Census Bureau numbers to get updated because at one point we were around 135th largest city in the country. With these numbers and kind of where things have trended in other cities, I expect us to be in more like the 1-teens now in terms of where we sit as one of the largest cities in the country. So another strong year of growth in the City of Sioux Falls. I'm going to turn over to Kevin Smith. He's our Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services to talk about specifically what we've seen with different units, multifamily, single family, and commercial projects. Kevin?
Thanks, Mayor. We'll jump right into the housing statistics. So as the mayor mentioned, total number was a little bit lower for 2024. We were at 2,150 units total. That's about a 19% decrease from 2023, where we were at 2,682. Multifamily was down a little bit. Townhomes are steady, or were steady. Duplexes were up from 0 to 18. Highest in the past 10 years, and also single-family homes increased. So looking specifically at single-family dwelling units, they took a slight dip in 2023, but they were back up in 2024 with 532 units permitted, and the dollar value for single-family homes increased just under 4% from 2023 to 2024 for a total value of $141 million. And as the mayor mentioned, the third quarter of 2024 was very strong for us, and we issued, I think, 130 new home permits in the last quarter of the year. So if you think about housing construction, that's typically not a winter undertaking, but to us, that's an indication of, hey, the housing market single-family housing market is picking up again because people are getting their, getting foundations dug and continuing construction throughout the winter. They're not stopping. The townhome units or townhouse units, we permitted 344 units in 2024. That's up just a little bit from 2023, where we had 331. And the total valuation for the townhome construction last year decreased slightly from 267.9 million versus 69 million the year before. The next graphic on multifamily units, as the mayor mentioned, they're down a little bit from 2023, and you can see what 2022 was like. But even though we're down slightly, we still constructed 1,256 new units. And if you were to look back over about a 20-year time period, what you would see is almost a predictable trend of peaks and valleys, where there's a lot of apartment construction. It takes a while for those apartments to get filled up, so they're reaching capacity, and then there's more reinvestment in apartments, and certainly the interest rates had, I think, a role to play in the financial pro formas over the last couple of years. But already, I looked at the information just from the first week of January. We've permitted one One multifamily development is 94 units, and we've got proposals for 2 more that I think total about 340. So within, the next probably 60 days, we'll be permitting about 400 units thereabouts. So 2025 seems to be starting off as a really a strong year for housing as well. Moving on in commercial, new commercial valuation was $602 million for 2024. That was down just very slightly from 2023, where we were at $618 million. Decrease, as we just noted, in apartments, a slight decrease in manufacturing, although we saw an increase in office, institutional, educational, and things like strip malls, hotels, and these are the top 10 projects last year. And as the mayor pointed out, we didn't have a lot of the really large projects, but what you also see on the screen is a good mix, right? That Sioux Falls, one of our benefits is that we're not entirely dependent on just one thing to be successful. We have 2 very strong, very growth-oriented medical centers, as well as you look at the apartment projects that did get permitted, and even a couple of the governmental projects. So a good mix, right? It isn't all just us. It isn't all just one segment of the industry, but for us, it's a very good indicator that our health is not solely based on just one thing. So the mayor mentioned the spike that the derecho had on the permit numbers. When we go from a normal year of 1,800 roofing permits to 5,000 in 2022, excuse me, don't get shocked by the peak numbers, that there's an explanation for some of those, and I think Neil and his team might be breaking that out separately in years to come. So hopefully we don't have any more of those type events, but if we do, we'll make sure they're understood in the permit numbers. So what do the numbers all mean? Generally speaking, it was a good year for the city of Sioux Falls. Another $1 billion in overall growth and development as compared to the region, and one of our peer communities is Fargo. So anecdotally, Fargo's building totals for 2024, I think we're about $685 million, and that's about $100 million less than they did the year before. So they're down a little bit. We're still ahead of that. 2025 looks to be a great year, and one of the things that makes Sioux Falls unique in that is that we grow responsibly, that we're not overextending our utility infrastructure. And you've heard Mark Cotter talk about the multi-million-dollar sewer projects and water projects that are going on. Every year, we work with Public Works and update our growth tier maps. So we have growth planned out very predictably for our development community in 5, 10, and then 15-year and beyond increments, so that last year, for example, we annexed about 400 acres, which doesn't seem like a lot. The year before that, we annexed over 700. We have an ample supply in the next 5 years to support growth, just with what we have planned for in terms of infrastructure and what we anticipate for annexation requests. Beyond that, Tier 2 and Tier 3, when we look out 15 years and beyond, the crystal ball can get kind of hazy, but in our case, we're very confident that between Public Works and Planning and Finance, certainly, that we can meet the growth needs, whether we have another 2022 and we have an exceptional year, or we have another year like 2024 and it's kind of business as usual. And if $1 billion is kind of the benchmark now, it's very responsible, it's very manageable from our perspective, and financially we're able to afford to sustain that growth. So with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor.
All right, well, thank you, Kevin. Just in wrapping this up, what's been fun about this year, you saw the spike in permit numbers in 2022, is this has been the year when a lot of those big projects from that year came online, right? And we started to see the fruits of all that labor. The Steel District, Sharapa 2, and their whole expansion opened this year. our new airport parking garage, which hopefully on days like today you would absolutely love. We dropped the first puck at Midco in the ice arena at Augustana College, University, sorry, Stephanie. And so we saw a lot of those big permitted projects come online this year. This year ahead, we're going to have some big numbers coming out of Foundation Park again, with a big one being CJ Foods and their project. We're already moving dirt out there on that thing. And I do have a little bit of optimism on residential development as well. I think you saw in Kevin's trend that peak and valley that we're at with multifamily. There's absorption happening right now. And I think we'll have probably another year of absorption this year on that. But the big theme for us is to continue to keep our community investable, right? Through the policies, through the planning, through the rates that we're charging for utilities, so that our residents can get in housing and multifamily as affordably as possible, and that people can stay in their homes as long as possible as well. So the big three priorities this year, there's going to be three. It's going to be managing growth and casting a vision. When you grow by almost 6,000 people a year, that's 6,000 people that all need housing, that all call police officers, that all drive on the streets, that need schools. So we're going to have another year of managing that and then casting the vision for that. Vision for what do we do with all these kids and families that continue to grow in our community, and how do we provide them the amenities they need. Second of the big three will be public safety and crime. And we're going to have a press conference here in a couple weeks once we get all our year-end crime stats tabulated and talk about that and that priority. And then the third is the blocking and tackling of government, which is streets and infrastructure, and providing the infrastructure to keep up with that growth. So a lot of momentum in 2024. It's going to lead into the year ahead. And with that, Kevin and I are both available to take any questions that you guys may have for us.
What do you attribute to the nearly 5,700 person increase in population?
Good leadership in the mayor's office. Is that, or do you want the real answer? It's similar. It's honestly, we kind of, before the pandemic, we were maybe in that 3,000 to 4,000 a year, and now it's 5 to 6 the last couple of years, but it's still, per capita, it's still that 2.5% to 3% growth. So that's just been steady. That's kind of been a trend in Sioux Falls. What I'm seeing, though, is 3 buckets of people that are coming to the city. The first bucket is regional people. They're from Rock Rapids, they're from Huron, they're from Worthington, they're from Laverne, and they're moving to Sioux Falls, okay, for whatever reason. They want the more urban life. The second bucket is people that they maybe left here and they boomerang back. They left here. My neighbor's a good example. Grew up here, took a job at Phoenix Children's, was down there for several years, realized how great Sioux Falls was, weather isn't everything, and he came back. And then the third is just new to market people that don't have a lot of ties and connections, but they like the tax climate and other things in South Dakota. So it's kind of the 3 buckets of people. If I had to parse those folks up, it's kind of the 3 camps that we're seeing right now.
Talk about how you arrived at the number. I know, we know about the census, the American survey, but how do you get to 219?
Yeah. The government watches everyone. We know where everybody is. Is that the right answer? No, it's not. I'm going to let Kevin talk about we have a formula and kind of a calculation in how we determine that. So, Kevin.
That was a great lead-in, though. Thanks, Mayor. It begins with the number of building permits, right? But we also use vacancy information that we get from the Realtors Association for single family, the vacancy information we get from multifamily, from South Dakota Multi-Housing Association. So right now, vacancy rate in the single family market is like 2.8%. Multifamily is 6.2%, 6.3%. But we also have to take into consideration what we're absorbing from previous years, right? So we have to factor not just in, hey, we had X number of permits and we calculate 2.45 people per household in a single family, 2.5 in multifamily. We don't all just factor that up. We also look back, and this is where especially Neil and his team in in building services is helpful is looking at when the certificate of occupancy is granted for these apartment projects. And as the mayor pointed out, just because something got permitted in 2024 doesn't mean that people occupied that apartment building. It probably is, it may not even be constructed yet or be done yet. So some of these are kind of lagging indicators. So we also have to look back at our certificates of occupancy and see, especially for the multifamily units, like, are there people actually living in them? And it's an iterative process, and it's been I think very accurate, because our benchmark is when we get the actual census information, so 2000, 2010, 2020, and we've used the same process for the last 15 years plus, and in between 2020 or the 2010 and 2020 census, we were pretty close with our projections as they were verified in the decennial census. So generally it is as much information, not because we're looking at individuals, but we're looking at a lot of different data sets and have to take into consideration, especially the vacancy rates, which that is a little more challenging, but we have a good line on that as well. That's the long answer to the mayor's short answer.
All the factors you've mentioned, inflation, rising costs of the city having to supply all these services, at what point do we have to look at higher density growth rather than spatial growth? Are we getting to a point where we really need to grow up more than out?
Mm-hmm. Well, we are, and I think we're getting there, and I think the Sharapa and Steel District is two examples of that, of two very dense developments that now we'll see how the community responds, all right? Are those going to fill up? Are the townhomes and the condos and the things that are being built in the core going to fill up? Is a development by Jay Christensen and the density on that lot, is that going to fill up? And so, trust me, from a municipal standpoint, the cost of sprawl and like building out into those 400 annex acres versus we already got sewer right below this building and we got electrical and we got cable and everything, much easier to build here. It's more expensive for a developer though, in a lot of ways. It's more expensive to the city for sprawl. It's less expensive to the developer. So the tension is between keeping costs low to the end user, right, and making housing affordable, and the density that a city would like to see and that we push for. So we don't incentivize density per se, but we do offer, tax increment financing to make projects like, both Sharapa and the Steel District financially feasible, or those wouldn't be able to be built to incentivize a dense project there. So, it's a trade-off and it's a tension. And I will say that we do still live in a part of the country and a part of even South Dakota where people like to have yards and garages, and they would rather be in the burbs. We're still experimenting with urban living. Okay, we're getting there. We've come a long way even since I've been in office, but an urban lifestyle is still new to people in Sioux Falls. But I'm seeing that trend shift slowly.
At some point, though, as you were mentioning, the cost of building a 2,000 square foot house or whatever it was being over $300,000, that suburban two-stall garage with a yard is going to be unreachable for people. Will the economics drive more density in that regard?
For sure they will. And there's so many, with the topic of housing, there's so many different factors that go into what the ultimate cost is to live somewhere. The infrastructure costs, the interest rates, the material costs, the labor costs, the specs of the homeowner. For instance, we have a TIF right now with Kelly Nielsen and Nielsen Homes out on Veterans Parkway. Our first housing TIF to incentivize single-family housing. And we toured it this summer. How's it going? What's the demand? What are you hearing? And it's going okay. It's going okay. You know why it's going just okay? He's not losing money, but he's not going to get rich off it. He's doing this for the city. It's going okay because there's only 2 garage stalls. People want 3. Oh, it's a twin home. We're still in single-family home ownership mentality in this part of the country versus like, a twin home or a townhome is kind of a step down. It's not. They're beautiful units. I mean, we saw them. But demand is just okay for them. So in some ways, the development community will keep building as long as the demand is there for what they're building. And so when consumer demand shifts, they will shift.
We've always been very developer-friendly, which for good reason. Do we need to try and adjust developer attitude a little bit? And I know it's consumer-driven, but at some point, the city can't sustain all of it.
It could be. I'll give you a real story, though. I met with someone this week, out-of-market investor, wants to bring their dollars to Sioux Falls and doesn't want to invest in their community anymore because their city has been so challenging to work with. And they have rent control. And he said, in our city right now, there are thousands of units sitting vacant because the rent control has only allowed them to raise rates at a very, very small rate. The cost of having someone occupy that space is more expensive than the rents they will get. So they're just not even leasing them. They're just leaving them all vacant. So government can have the opposite effect of what we sometimes think they will. Okay, can we incent developers or put things in place to encourage them to do things? Can do that, but sometimes that pendulum can get swung too far as well. So keeping Sioux Falls investable continues to be the goal for us. So we will continue to be a very development-friendly community as well, as long as we're meeting the needs of the residents. Yeah.
So as you look at the population growth and then you look at it in terms of the metro area, politically, does this create anything more in terms of responsibility or, if you will, my word, power when you look in the legislature and when you look at things that folks need to listen to, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't have the MSA numbers. Sioux Metro Growth Alliance would have that, but it's north of 300,000. And so, roughly, just spitball math, a third of the state's sales tax revenue comes from this MSA. But that sometimes has a negative effect in the legislature because a small town in Bonham County that needs funding for a road that's crumbling, it's very hard for that legislator to want to support initiatives in Sioux Falls where we have all the things. It's like, and they have a road that they simply can't use anymore because it's shot. And so in some ways it helps to have growth from a statewide discussion. In some ways it also hurts as well. And we want to be cognizant of that. But we also know that as we grow, those people in Bonham County or from Ipswich or from Huron or wherever they come from, they do like to come and enjoy the amenities of Sioux Falls that we can offer. So as we grow and evolve and develop, it really does benefit the state and the residents across the state as well. But we want to be very cognizant of that tension that exists. All right. While he's here, I just do want to make sure everyone knows Neil. So Neil's the new Butch Warrington. So when Kevin references Neil, he's our new Chief Building Officer. So when you talk about building and permits and who's overseeing all of our inspections and so forth, he's got a big job based on the volume you see. So you'll get to know him more in the years ahead, but he's been a great addition. Been with the city a long time and is doing a great job stepping into Butch's role. So with that being said, we'll wrap it up and wish you guys a blessed rest of your week. Thanks.